Hello, class. This is Professor Schachter with my lecture on Chapter 4 of the Belch book. Okay, and give me a second while I bring up the presentation, the PowerPoint. Here we go. And in Chapter 4, the Consumer Behavior chapter, there are a couple of things that are very, very important. And we're going to go over them right now. So, first of all, is the definition of what consumer behavior is. And as you can see here in this slide, it is the process and activities people engage in with relation to products and services to satisfy their needs and desires. Okay, so what does this really mean? What are some of the processes and activities? Well, we need to realize that we want something, right? So let's say we're very groggy in the morning, not feeling really very active or in the mood to go out. So one of the things that people do is they resort to caffeine, drinking coffee. But where did the idea of drinking coffee come in? Many, 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 many decades ago, people discovered that caffeine was a stimulant that wakes us up and gives us energy. Okay. But now we have different brands of caffeine, right? We have Starbucks. I don't know. I apologize. We have Starbucks. We have Dunkin' Donuts. We have coffee that is like Nespresso machines. We have a lot of choices when it comes to coffee. So when somebody thinks of coffee, they don't just normally think of any coffee. Although some people may think of any coffee, they go to work, they have these at work, they have these coffee machines, and they don't care. They just want a coffee, a black cup of coffee full of caffeine. So then, but what about when they're not at work, when they have a choice? What do they do? Okay, and that's where consumer behavior comes in. How do we select a brand of coffee? Is it just on price? Probably not. Most likely not. Is it on reputation, on recommendations from friends? How do we make this choice? And that goes for everything. Of course, products that are higher in cost. So let's say college education for you. You may have done a lot more research on it than for a cup of coffee, right? The risk is higher, the commitment is higher, the cost is higher. Same thing could be said for an automobile, a house, an engagement ring. So the more things cost, the more involved our process of selecting becomes, right? And that is what's part of this chapter. So as we can see here in figure 4.1, which is the basic model of consumer decision making, which is very, very important, we must first recognize that we have a problem that we must solve. And that problem that we must solve requires us to perform certain thought processes, right? So the first thing I want to know is, what do I know about this topic? So if it is something like I'm lethargic in the morning and I need a quick pick me up, well, the first thing I say to myself is, Ted, because I don't call myself professor, Ted, what can you do to wake up? You can take a really cold shower, but it's cold out and you don't want to do that. What about a coffee, caffeine? Okay. So I know what I need to do. But what if I'm confronted with an opportunity to solve this problem when I don't know what to do? So let's say I am in Ohio and I'm staying at a hotel, I'm there for a meeting, and I need coffee. Well, let's say my brand is Starbucks. Well, what do? I don't know where Starbucks is. I know I want one. So I need information that is not inside my head. So the second place I look for information is outside of my head. I ask my friends. I research it online. So that's what we must understand, that information search has two steps to it. The first step is what we know about the problem, and that's inside our minds, our heads, um, and that is the first place we look. The second place we look is to fill in the information gaps that we don't have solved based on the information we know. So then we search outside. So outside, so internal information search, and then there's external information search. The external information search involves other people, other resources. All right, so we have this information. So then somebody says to me, okay, there's a Starbucks 2 miles away, but there's a Dunkin' Donuts here. There is a McDonald's that gives you coffee, and there's a coffee shop over there. So you have three choices. So this is my alternative evaluation. I don't know that's independent coffee place, right? I don't know it, but it's there and it looks nice. It's quaint. I know McDonald's, and I'm not so sure if I like it or not. I know Dunkin' Donuts, and I personally know that Dunkin' Donuts, the coffee's not strong enough for me. So this is what's known as an evoked set. In the alternative evaluation part, we look at a list of brands that we know, and we select from those lists of brands that we know of and heard of the one that's most likely going to satisfy our needs when our preferred choice is not available. So for me, that coffee shop that is independent and quaint and cute became part of my Evoke set because I know I don't want to go 2 miles to Starbucks. It's out of my way. I know I don't want Dunkin' Donuts because it's not going to make me wake up. And I'm not in the mood to go into a McDonald's because I don't know. Let's just say I'm not in the mood. So then my evaluation was, let me go into this quaint Starbucks looking coffee shop and try their coffee. The important part of this is that when we don't have the brands that are our preferred brands, right? That could be for detergent, it could be for toothpaste, a lot of things, restaurants, or to eat lunch. Then we look at this evoked set of brands that we know in that product category. So the problem is this. So the problem started out with me recognizing I have a need that needs fulfilling. How this need came about was that I don't have any coffee around. I woke up in my hotel room and there was no coffee. So scarcity was the reason. People have a lot of reasons why they develop these problems to seek a solution. They're hungry, they're thirsty, they need a job, or they need a career. So then college becomes a goal of information search. All right. So I made my decision and I go inside that quaint little coffee shop. And then I say to myself, did I like the coffee? Did I like the service? Was the price fair? So on and so forth. And that's the post-purchase evaluation. So the part A, you really need to know it for any quizzes or final exams, but it's important to understand the order and what triggers each one of these stages. Now, on the psychological side, we have something instead of problem recognition, we have motivation. Like, for example, what gives us the idea to do something? Well, maybe we join a gym because we want to be healthy, right? Or maybe because we've been stuck in our houses for so long for COVID. And let's say then we have this thing called perception. So we're motivated to do something, but then we have the perception of what we believe about a certain problem, a certain product category, or a certain service, right? And that perception may be true or it may be false, but we need to investigate it. But the problem with perceptions is that they form our attitudes. So we hear a lot of social issues like the environment, right? So let's talk about the environment for a second. A lot of people believe that All this environmental things that are going on, from no straws and recycling, so on and so forth, are made up, make believe. There's nothing wrong with the environment, right? The planet is fine. We don't have to worry about climate change. Well, that's a perception, but that perception also forms the attitude of rejection of new ideas, and then we integrate that integration into our lives. And then hopefully we learn from that that maybe we should that our original perception was not correct. But in essence, when you follow this, you have to understand how hard it is to overcome perceptions and attitudes. It isn't so easy as to say, hey, don't do that, or um, think differently, or you can't tell people they're wrong. Marketing is about persuasion, not judging. We have to gradually shift people's thoughts. And that's why it's really important to understand the psychological part or the psychological process, because that is very hard to overcome. Now, I'm not going to do this as far as an assignment or anything, but if you look at yourselves, and that would be a good exercise for you to actually look deeply inside your brain and say, what are certain things that I am so committed to from an attitude point of view and integrate it in my life? And what would it take for me to change my mind, to maybe convince me that it's not true, and to maybe choose different brands? And that is the challenge we face in our marketing jobs. So this is the core, one of the two things you need to know. You need to understand the basic model of consumer decision making. And now you do not need to know the hierarchy of needs. Okay, you do not need to know that. Now Maslow is a second element you need to know. Now, no one really uses Maslow very much in the real world. At least I haven't been part of any agency that talks about Maslow as foundational to how we sell products. However, the way we use products fall within Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Because what happens is we have the basic physiological needs that we have of hunger and thirst. These basic needs are important because they always need to be replenished. So we're always using up these resources, right? We're using up water, we're using up food, and this includes things like toothpaste and stuff. These need to be replaced. So basic needs give way to products that are constantly being replaced. And safety needs is the way we perceive. Let's take the pandemic, and I don't like using this, but a lot of things are going to, for example, people are saying that, soon we'll be able to go to the movies a lot again. Yeah, but how do we feel? Do we feel safe sitting next to strangers? You see, we have a certain formation in our mind right now about feeling safe, social distancing. Will we be able to go to a ball game or a concert and feel safe? So safety concerns are important. Social needs, again, we've been social distancing. And of course, esteem needs are about our ego, and self-actualization needs are about our emotional state. In other words, we're doing things just for ourselves. So if we are going to learn, let's say, to speak a foreign language, let's say French, and we're not learning French to do business or to speak with French people in France, that would be a social need. We're doing it to read French literature for our own satisfaction, because French is a language that's almost impossible to translate in such a way that it holds true to the actual vernacular itself. So the purity of the language loses something when we try to translate it. So the self-actualization needs are the things we do for ourselves. We may run a marathon for ourselves, but we also may run it for the ego of sharing with others. Social media is all about esteem needs. Social media may be all about social needs with our family and our friends. So, as you can see, we do feel these products and attitudes and behaviors do go a little bit on the Maslow scale. The most important thing about Maslow's hierarchy of needs is that you need to satisfy one need before you move on to the next one. So, for example, you're not going to be worried about your safety as much if you're hungry or thirsty and you're really, really looking for a plate something to eat. Okay, and the same thing goes up to social esteem and self-actualization. For an exam, what you need to do is you need to learn what each one of these levels are and the order in which they are, from basic to the most um, to the highest level, which is self-actualization. You do not need to know psychoanalytic theory or motivation research. You don't need to know this or this or this. You do need to know, I'm sorry, you do need to know internal search that we discussed, and you do need to know external search that I discussed. So let's discuss this diagram right here. Now, the thing about it is this, and this is the core of why this is important. You need to understand how advertising really works. So let's say you're walking down the street and you see a billboard. If you notice that billboard, that was you allowing that billboard to penetrate your mind, your defenses, so you are aware of it. That's called selective exposure. So if you see 10 billboards and you acknowledge, let's say, 5 of them, right? I'm making this up. So you have selective exposure towards 5 billboards. You know that they exist and you vaguely know what they're about, although you probably forgot them already. Now, let's say you pay attention to 3 of them. Let's say there are for a fashion label, a movie, and maybe a perfume or cologne that triggers your interest. Okay, so you pay attention to those 3. But let's say out of those 3, only 2 of them are really, really something you want to understand better. Let's say the movie, and let's say you're really interested in that perfume or cologne because it's new. And let's say out of all those, you just remembered the movie because he has actors in it who you actually want to see. So where we start with a neighborhood of 10 billboards, by the time it's all said and done, you only remember 1. And if you want to test this theory out, just think of the way you scroll through Instagram. You have some selective exposure. You may stop here and there. You may pay attention to a couple. You may want to seek a deeper understanding of even fewer, and you probably don't remember almost any of them. So by the time we're all said and done, only 5% of all communication messages, if the brands are lucky, will be retained in the memory of consumers and possibly end up in their evoked set. That is why we spend so much money on advertising. It's why we do so much integrated marketing communications, so the consumer can be experiencing the brand awareness through many different channels. It is important that you you understand what each one of these 4 elements mean and the order in which they are in. We covered all this. You don't need to know any of the math or and you don't need to know multi-attribute attitude model. Heuristics, you need to know the definition of. So heuristics are basically exactly what it says. Decision rules customers use for purchase decisions. So if you know that you're online and you know what the shopping cart is, and you know what button you need to press to add to cart and the process of checking out and buying something, that's heuristics. You need to know the definition of brand loyalty. But the importance of brand loyalty is that it eliminates choice. So, for example, if you know you want an iPhone or a Samsung Galaxy, you're not going to consider anything else. And the beautiful part about brand loyalty is you're not going to look at alternatives and you may not be price sensitive at all. You're just going to buy that Apple or Samsung phone. That's great for manufacturers. Don't worry about this. Um, you do need to know post purchase evaluation, which we discussed. You do not need to know behavior learning theory or classical conditioning process or this or this or this or this. Now let's talk about culture because culture is important. Culture is what we learn, like it says here, values, norms, and customs by members of a society. So, for example, our family is culture, is a culture group. And we share and we in order to participate in our family we must um, partake in the norms and values of our community. Now fit could be a subculture, right? Then we have social classes, right? So at fit it's freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. Those are social classes. Seniors are at a higher level in some ways because they're ready to graduate. So they register early, they get choices of classes, so on and so forth. While, freshmen who just come in are just really learning the process. And they have or actually 4 years till they graduate. So I'm not saying that I am saying that that by when we talk about social class, are freshmen usually hang out with freshmen. They don't usually hang out with seniors. There's no contact between the two, and there's certain rules about the freshman social class. That's different than the senior social class. And when we are at work, we have staff, we have CEO, we have managers. The whole world is divided into different social classes that are united by interests, behaviors that are grouped together. As a reference group, let's say celebrities. Celebrities are a reference group for a lot of people. They're aspirational. Might say, I want that lifestyle. For me, my reference group was made up of really high achieving CEOs and business leaders that I wanted to emulate, or world leaders, or people whose biographies I read. So we all pick our reference groups, but when we pick our reference groups, that's also the benchmarks against which we measure our own success. And we have to make sure that our reference groups are the ones that can really, really benefit us. And then, of course, there's situational determinants, meaning that I may have a value system and I won't do X, Y, and Z. Let's say I'm a vegan, all right, and I don't eat meat. But let's say I'm at a meeting with a client who is who represents a steakhouse. Forget vegan, let's say vegetarian, who represents a steakhouse. And if I don't eat steak with him, I could lose my job or the account. Now, this is an extreme circumstance, but what do we do? That means that if somebody who's vegetarian and chooses, let's say, to eat a piece of beef in that one particular situation to save their job or to win the account, does not mean they're not vegetarians. It just means they made an exception that one time. And that's it. I want you to read the book, But you do not need to know the things I said that you're not responsible for. I will not test it, and the final exam will not test it. And there'll be no discussions based on it. And of course, I wish you much luck and success. And if you have any questions about anything in chapter 4, I am available. Thank you.